Hi, it's Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO here in beautiful Montreal, welcoming you to another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. We're part of Fractional Pros Canada, the home for Canada's fractional community, and you can find us on Facebook. We bring you conversations about everything fractional that matters for fractional executives and businesses from coast to coast. Think of this as your go-to spot for real talk, practical wisdom, and strategies you can actually use, all without the corporate fluff and with plenty of Canadian content. Whether you're a fractional pro or a business in our great country of Canada and beyond, this conversation is for you. Grab your espresso and let's dive in. Welcome to the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. I'm your host and Fractional CMO, Robert Mendelson, here in beautiful Montreal. And joining us today from all the way down that long street is Natasha Jeshani. Natasha is president, CEO, and founder of Career Contacts and Training Arch. Did I mention you're in Vancouver? You're in Vancouver.
I am.
An expert HR consultant, a member of the McKay CEO Forum's Committee of Advisors, and the author of the HR Insider. She's spent over 15 years helping companies across Canada and the U.S. strategically recruit, retain, and develop their human capital. Today's episode sponsored by the Fractional Pros Canada.ca directory. Scaling a business is hard enough without the high price of a full-time C-suite hire. Most CEOs I'm talking to need high-level strategy to break through, but they don't want the overhead, the long-term risk, or the 6-month recruiting cycle, something Natasha is very familiar with handling. When they ask for a shortcut, I send them over to the Fractional Pros Canada directory, curated hub for vetted high-tier fractional talent like Natasha, experts who step in, find the gaps, deliver the ROI from day one. Instead of digging through generic job boards, savvy leaders go where the specialists are already gathered. Business leaders, find your next strategic partner on the directory at fractionalproscanada.ca. Natasha, welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
All right. So right before, I would kind of go back to your in your past here. So before you got into the world of HR and recruiting, looks like you spent some time in Spain.
I did.
Doing an internship for a multinational, which was focused on natural technologies for environmental cleanups, which is very different from what you're doing today. So I'm curious, talk to us a little bit about what that was like. That little niche sector sounds like that's probably ballooned into something much bigger today. And what were you able to take away from that experience that you've kept with you in what you're doing today?
So I think for me, what I have realized is all of these little moments have really contributed to some really cool opportunities down the road. And so, the decision to take French in high school allowed me to be quite comfortable moving to Spain without speaking Spanish. So that language skill was really helpful. Being able to leave home, move to another country, new language. I mean, I make it sound like it was terrible. I was in the south of Spain. It was stunning. I've left a piece of my heart there. It is gorgeous in Malaga. So
are you?
I know, really. But it allowed me to get outside of my comfort zone. And I think that's kind of been the theme of my career is whether it's voluntary or not, I am constantly having to step outside of my comfort zone. And working in an organization where I knew nothing about what they did or how they did it, it really just allowed me to go in fully open-minded and absorb and learn what I could. And so that year was really incredible. And I couldn't have known that many years later, I would end up in an engineering space working with engineers on the HR and recruitment side. So there was a full circle moment, but it wasn't intentional. It was just being open to saying yes.
Yeah, you mentioned getting out of your comfort zone, and that is a theme that many people face, go through, experience in their lives at some point. I've experienced it a lot. And I'd imagine the world of recruiting and HR, it plays a big part as well, where somebody is looking to make a career shift, or maybe they get promoted to a whole different department or a whole different role, which is out of their comfort zone. What have you encountered as far as working with companies and candidates on both sides who have to manage that getting out of the comfort zone?
I think a big piece is as much as we'd like to think HR is purely reactive, it doesn't have to be. And so the traditional way of supporting organizations is you come in, there's a problem, we fix it. And yet what we have learned, 18 plus years of doing this is there's so much that we can do up front. And it's the same for candidates. So often what candidates will do is they will work in a job, they'll be let go or they'll leave and then they'll look for their next job. But there's so much you can do during your tenure at an organization, whether it's building your references, building your community, collecting opportunities. All of these things really contribute. On the client side, what I have found is our HR audit is really the best way to just understand where a company's at. Most of the time, we're in a scenario where they don't know what they don't know. And so you're just reacting to what's coming in. Whereas if you can understand where you've been, where you're at currently, and then where you're going, then we can create a roadmap to get there. So I would say a lot of that uncomfortability is important, but it doesn't have to be reactive. It can be a proactive scenario.
I want to talk about the structure of your fractional world that you've built. A lot of fractionals, when they start off, they decide they're going to be, a one-person show.
Yeah.
And they don't think about things like, how am I going to scale this business? How am I going to get to $1 million? How am I going to exit one day? They don't think about those things. They're just thinking about, how do I get my first client?
Yeah.
And then how do I get my second and third and maybe fourth? And how do I keep the pipeline full? And it kind of stops there.
Yeah.
What you've done, what you've built now as it exists today, is more of a firm with many fractionals or consultants, as whatever interchangeable word we want to use.
Yeah.
All plays together. And there's a lot of benefits to that. But tell me about how you started out. Did you start out with that vision of building a firm, or did you start out with that one person show mentality and at some point decided, oh, I'm gonna scale this baby?
So I'm going to say neither to that one, because for me, I never had a dream of building a business. I always wanted to lead people. And I found myself in one of those fortunate events where I was in a role I probably would have been there for the rest of my life. I was in a senior HR position. I had just had my son and I couldn't come back to work. There was a hiring freeze. And so I was put in a really difficult situation where for 6 months I was without employment. And so I was forced out of my comfort zone. And so I had to negotiate a new way of working. And so I did part-time consulting work for my day job, and I went out and got another part-time job. And that was 13 years ago. So the word fractional wasn't even in play at that point. I was just a consultant, and I fell in love with the work. So for me, I am a big believer that if you do what you love, you will do it well. And I found something that I completely loved. And so even when I went back to my day job full time, I never let go of that side hustle. And that side hustle eventually made me enough financially, basically the same as my day job. So I was able to leave the day job and then ended up going on my own. And I think for a lot of fractionals, because we're in survival mode at that point, you want to make sure that you have your anchor client, that you have that backup client if something happens to that anchor client, that you stop doing business development when your plate is full, and then you have to re-engage when you've got that space. So it's a really challenging time. For me, what I recognized is I don't enjoy working alone. I'm an extrovert. I like working around people. And so for me, I continued to build a network. I continued to build work to the point where I had too much for one person. And so I had enough for maybe 1.5, and I shared that wealth. And then I had enough for 2.5. And truly, eventually, we had built something small but meaningful. And it wasn't until we did a merger with Career Contacts that we were able to really grow that and move from just doing HR consulting to doing both recruitment and HR. And I think one of the things that's lost on the fractional side is the fractional world should not be where you go to because you can't find the day job. And it shouldn't be where you go to, out of desperation. I think it can be something that fills your cup for a short time, and that's okay. But if you're going to build a firm, it has to be more than that. And so for me, I recognize that some of my superpowers were in things like building relationships and connecting people. And so I just decided that I was going to build my dream job and I was going to tell people about it. And Robert, I will tell you, the first few years, people did not buy in. People didn't think that this was a viable solution to build a recruitment firm without commissions. Like that wasn't how it was done. All my recruiters are HR professionals, not sales reps. That's not how it's done. And so going against that traditional way of working can be challenging. But for me, that is how it ended up growing because I told people, and eventually someone said, "Hey, I really love what you're doing. Can I be a part of it?" And then you say that to the next person. And now 2026, we're at 25 of us and have a roster of people that want to be part of what we're building. So I don't know that it was necessarily an unintentional or an intentional growth, but for me, it was always being very clear with where my strengths were, what kind of work I wanted to do, and how I wanted to do it, and then being very comfortable talking about it. And eventually, this sort of grew together.
Your model of no commission is something I want to double click on. But before we go there, you said a couple of things I want to circle back on. One was that fractionals should be very intentional when they make their decision to become fractional. Definitely there are some fractionals who become fractional, as you alluded to. They lose their corporate job and they're like, okay, maybe what I will do now is become fractional. And versus a fractional who makes a decision, whether they've lost their corporate job, whether they've intentionally decided, I'm leaving my corporate job, I'm going to be fractional. Two very different approaches. One is very intentional and one is more, kind of like fill in the gaps till I find something better to do. So that's something interesting to mention to anybody who is on that path right now to keep in mind. And the other thing I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned the early days when you became more than one person and you hired that second person and third person and you started to delegate. A lot of solopreneurs, fractionals, as they grow, even business leaders as they grow, founders as they grow, that delegation step, the first time, is tough. I'm letting go of my baby. I'm giving the responsibility to somebody else. How did you manage that internally with yourself?
So here's the cheat. Because I'm in HR, I understand training and development very well. And so the confidence you get in training, in delegating to someone that you have trained, is really easy because you've given them the tools, you set them up for success. And my entire team, all 25 people, know the buck stops with me. So if there is a challenging conversation, if we need to let go of a client, if there's something that's escalating, I will always be there. And so they have a lot of confidence going in that they have the formulas. I've built this firm on transparency. And so when people start at Career Context, they always say, I'm surprised at how much you tell us. But if I give you the tools, you will be able to service our clients as well, if not better than the way that I would. And a lot of people operate from a place of scarcity of, well, if I let this person in and tell them how I do it, they'll go do it themselves. And we've had a few who have gone on and started their own firms. And to me, that's a sense of pride that firm was built on the legacy of this one. But most recognize that the work of fractional HR and the work of building a company are two different things. So a fractional individual is still very much a doer. They are going out, they're a CFO, they are doing that CFO work for the most part. And then a sub part of that is making sure they have some clients. When you build a firm, there's a lot more to it because I not only have the work that's coming in, but there's also the payroll, the benefits, the building of the company. You've got rent to pay. You've got, all of these different things that come into place. So it just depends on what you want. And for me, it just sort of grew organically. I I also paid my dues. I worked really hard. I made sure that I had the expertise before I went out. I had the education, the experience, and then I went out and did it. And when I advise, the best part of that advice is that it comes with a strong backing. And that's what all of our fractionals have, is they have years and years of expertise in a specific area. But unlike marketing or finance, HR has such a wide breadth of different specialties that I'm also very comfortable saying, this isn't my forte. I'm not the best person to talk to you about health and safety or about labor relations, but I've got people on my team who are. And so we're stronger together that way.
Your model with no commissions is very rare in your industry. It kind of makes me think there was a taxi company that launched here in Montreal a number of years back, and their model was that they were paying their drivers like an hourly wage or a salary. I can't remember if it was full-timer, but it wasn't based on how many rides they were getting or how far they were traveling per hour. It was based on a flat rate. So drivers were getting paid no matter, even if they were sitting for an hour waiting for a ride. That model didn't last. I think after about a year or so, they went under. So it's interesting that you've kind of disrupted the traditional HR recruiting model with a no commission model, and you're clearly successful if you're at a team of 25. How did that come to be? Was it always like that from the start, or was there a point where you intentionally decided, I'm not paying commissions, I'm going all in on this?
Yeah, so I had a very hard time when I was in a traditional recruitment firm that my success was attributed to someone else getting less. So the less I paid a candidate, the more was in my pocket, or the more I charged a client, the gap would be wider for me to take home. And that never sat well from a values perspective. For us, although I have a recruitment team and an HR team, for my recruitment team specifically, because they're all full-time employees, what I recognized is for them to be able to do what they do, it allows me to go out and get more business. So my job is to feed the funnel. They can't be held responsible. And we actually just got a review, the 5-star review this morning. And it was because we had 2 recruiters. One of the recruiters was on vacation on Friday. And so a second recruiter was seamlessly communicating with her and got her the final offer for her role. And that's because they share inboxes, they share phone lines. And so there's never an opportunity where someone is ghosted or accidentally forgotten about. And there's a lot of trust with my recruitment team. And that creates, so what I realized for me personally, I am intrinsically motivated. I am not externally motivated. That is where commission thrives. If you thrive on me being your competition, then commissions work well. When you're intrinsically motivated, I'm just fighting who I was last year. And so that's the kind of team I'm building. Is my job is to bring in the work, and their role is to make sure that our clients feel good, our candidates feel supported, and that we close the roles, or conversely, that we do the HR side. And so they have a proper salary, just like that firm. So I equate it to like servers in Europe, right? They get a living wage and tips are optional, as opposed to in North America where tips are really how they're surviving. I didn't want that model. I wanted that model of you're okay regardless. And then we do quarterly bonuses based on the entire organization's success. And so it's coupled with, there's sort of a merit side, there's a company side, and it really allows them to see where the money's coming from, where it's missing, and how we can move forward. So we assess our numbers on a quarterly basis together. And it's worked beautifully. I mean, we're going on year 5 of that model because my partner retired back in 2021. And so I've been at the helm since the beginning of 2021. And that was a non-negotiable for me. We were not going to be a commission house. We provide referrals. So if you give me a client, I'm happy to give you a referral fee, but we're not ever going to be a commission house.
I mean, I love that as a former business owner myself who went through, obviously had to hire people, and at some point had conversations with recruiters. And what never made sense to me about the model is that whether I was hiring somebody who was, a $50,000 employee or a $200,000 employee, the amount of effort is more or less the same for the recruiter. And it never made sense to me why is a recruiter getting 4 times as much for doing the same effort as they would have done for somebody, who's hiring who's earning a quarter of the salary? The whole thing never made sense to me. So as a business owner, thank you for breaking that model. I wish I had known. But I think that's great. That also, while I'm on my rant, same goes for real estate agents. I don't understand that model, how they're getting the same percentage of commission, whether they're selling $1 million home or a $200,000 home. It's the same amount of work, more
So
or less.
we
Anyway,
have three different models on the recruitment side, specifically for that
okay.
reason, is that we wanted to have transparency. So the temporary staffing division has a specific program, a permanent
Mhm.
staffing division has a specific program, and then executive search. So they provide a different way of work. And obviously, we've chatted a little bit about AI and how we infuse that. So we're very loud about the fact that we're human first and we're AI enabled. And so we're not any further behind. Like we're comparing our work to AI forward organizations, and we're still ahead in terms of candidate submissions, close rates, still being human first. So I don't see that going away anytime soon either, but also understanding the value of technology and something that's infused in the work we do.
And by the way, for all the other recruiters and real estate agents who want to send the hate mail, it's Robert M. fractionalproscanada.ca. Uh, I will read all emails. I'm not sure I'm going to respond though.
I will tell you,
Um,
our number one referral source is other HR and recruitment professionals because I have built, and I've talked about it for so many years. I believe in collaboration over competition. And so if you are a temp staffing company and you don't do HR, you feel good about referring to career contacts because we'll service their HR. And the next time they call me for a temp, I will send that work where it belongs. And so,
mhm.
we are very comfortable servicing that sort of the pieces that our partners don't do. If you're an executive search firm and you don't do temp, we'll take care of it. So we've actually created a lot of beautiful relationships in the space. And so that collaboration allows you to really just respect everyone's got a different way of earning a living, and that's okay. But also, the way we're doing it is a little different, and that's okay too.
Any tips you can give to fractionals who have a firm or business owners, anybody who has a team where they're trying to build in redundancy so that if, employee A goes on vacation for a couple weeks, they seamlessly hand over what they're working on to employee B to pick up where they left off, and the client really doesn't see a difference other than instead of talking to Bob yesterday, they're talking to Sally today.
So that's where the HR side really comes in. If you don't have your HR components in place before you hire, you will have a tough time with that. If you don't have a proper onboarding program, if you don't have the policies and practices in place, if you don't have technology that actually speaks to the values you're building, those are all things that are really important. So when we come into an organization, our smallest client had two people, two employees when she started with us. Now we work for organizations that have, 10,000 plus employees and everything in between. And what we found is that there's this misconception that when you hire your first employee, that somehow they're just supposed to know what to do and how to do it. And there's also a really funny way of people interchanging job postings and job descriptions. They're completely different. Job postings are external, they're supposed to attract talent. Job descriptions are an internal document to help hold someone accountable to KPIs, compensation, performance management. So these are all things you have to take into account. Whether you're a fractional that's going to hire one or two employees, potentially one or two consultants to offload any extra work. Maybe you don't have an SEO specialty and you're a CMO, you want to bring someone in. Any of those partnerships, they require at least a general level of HR consultancy to support you. And don't be afraid to hire a lawyer. We adore our lawyers. And I think that's something that people often get scared of because of the price tag. But I can promise you that the price tag of not using HR and not using lawyers are exponentially higher.
I agree. I've lived it.
Yeah, yeah, and most
Yes.
small businesses will. It accounts for most of the companies here in Canada, and so we have to be mindful of what it takes to run a business, and making sure that you have all of the right pieces. You've got insurance, you've got legal, you've got HR. They're non-negotiables.
You mentioned something interesting. You said that the job posting and the job description are two different things. Now, I always thought that you want to be very accurate and targeted in your job posting and make it as close to the job description as you can, because the last thing you want to do is, sell this dream and this vision in the job posting, which is completely disconnected from the reality of the actual job. And when you get candidates coming in, there's no match right at the beginning. They've always been led down the wrong path from the beginning. So talk to us about job post versus job description. How should the post be different from the description?
So when you're talking about a posting, you want to cast a wider net because you've got a range likely. So you're hiring a marketing associate. It might be a range of 75 to 90K, which means that you need to understand what a 75K person looks like and what a 90K person looks like. So we built a few tools at Career Context. One of them is our success profile tool. So it takes an organization through all of the different elements of a strong candidate. What does it look like before we even post the role? Then we take their job posting and we elevate it. And when it comes to a job posting, you want to cast a wide net. You want to be able to attract a number of different individuals within that range. So 3 to 5 years, 75 to 90. These are all of our nice to haves. These are our must haves. So all of those things are captured in a job posting. And then the job posting also has to be optimized for things like SEO. People have to find the posting to be able to apply. Now, with firms like ours, we're also going out and actively headhunting. So, along with the job posting, once we're having the conversation, we might have like a recruitment brief where there's more information on what the company does, what their values are, a little bit more about the role, the team, things like that, which would which would be closer to a job description. When they come into the organization, that job description shouldn't have anything that surprises them. It would just be more granular. So all of that, as opposed to saying, they're going to be doing AR and AP in the job description, they're going to actually outline what some of those pieces are. So the job posting might allude to tooling, expertise levels. So they might need to be at least intermediate in Excel, need to know pivot tables and macros. That's fine. But when you go into the job description, we actually have to decide how we're going to manage those KPIs and manage that performance. Because often what happens is we bring someone in, and in those first 3 months, they're critical, especially for our Canadian employers. That onboarding period that probation period is critical. We want you to be able to truly assess their fit in those first 3 months. We want you to take your time in hiring, and if it's not the right fit, we want you to terminate quickly. It is not only the best possible scenario for you, but it is for the employee too. So that job description should be the basis of how you're going to hold someone accountable, and your performance management program should be associated very, very closely to that.
When businesses are looking at hiring a fractional in their first fractional, very often it's not HR. Very often, I think CFO is probably top of the list. It's kind of the easiest one to figure out what the return is on the bottom line. After that, maybe it's CMO. HR is somewhere further down that list. Make the case for the hard ROI of hiring a fractional HR firm, a recruiter, somebody coming in rather than keeping it in-house.
So a big part of that is exactly what you said. Even in the question was, recruiter, HR in-house. So HR is such a wide range of skill sets, which is why organizations have such a hard time. And in your first 50 people, you don't need a CHRO or a VP of HR. What you need is a little bit of recruitment, a little bit of HR operations, some administration, some executive presence for certain pieces. So when you hire a fractional CFO, you get a very high level, and then you'll likely hire maybe a financial analyst or a financial planner, whatever it is that you need underneath that. When you hire career contacts, you have access to our entire skill set. So if you need a recruiter for the next 3 months, you have access to us. And then let's say you've grown the team and now we need to build out your performance management program. Great. Now the union's knocking on your door. We have a labor relations team for that. Now we're building out the site. We need to make sure that you're health and safety compliant. We'll bring in our expertise. So you can take whichever expertise you need in the moment and then step back. So the ebb and flow of fractionals are beautiful. Now, a traditional fractional is usually more of a retainer. So they're monthly retained 1, 2, 3 times a week. Whereas with career contacts, you can do the retainer for a traditional fractional, but you can also hire us what we call our heartbeat hotline. So it's HR phone a friend. You don't know what you don't know, call us. We'll help fill in the gaps. And then we also do the projects. So we're going to build this program out for you. We're going to create your handbook. We're going to do your performance management program. We're going to do a comp review. So there's multiple ways that you can engage with our team, but we do build this company to be a one-stop shop. So anything that you need when it comes to HR, we can service. And I would say our number one partner is finance. We report directly to the executive director or the CEO, but CFOs and HR should be hand in hand. The dollars should dictate what we can afford to grow this company to. And then HR helps you get there and make sure that the people that are in those roles are the right ones, without, pretending like the people who got you from 0 to 1 million are potentially not the same people who are going to get you from 1 to 10. And so we help guide as many of those people through to develop them to become the person that you now need at 1 million to 10 and 10 and 100. So I think all of those things have to be taken into consideration. And if you don't have a person who understands HR, employment standards, all of these things by your side as you're starting, you're already starting at a deficit.
Yeah, I think that really speaks to the difference between a one-person fractional and a fractional firm, where the firm has often multiple expertise under the same roof. So that's definitely another reason why any fractional should at least think about going to the firm route and growing the team instead of not being scalable.
Yeah.
I also love the heartbeat hotline. It kind of makes me think of the Butterball turkey line for American Thanksgiving, where you can call up and, hey, how do I cook this turkey and get the little tips that these things happen. These little things in your life happen where you need to know how to do it, and you don't know where to turn. Now, these days, of course, we have AI and everything, but at least back in the day, right, picking up the phone to ask a very specific question to an expert is brilliant, and especially in the HR world. I kind of think like you want that answer from a person because you're talking about HR more than AI. So that's
Yeah.
good. I like
And
that.
the longer we work with our clients, the more context we have, right? So we know this individual has had this challenge before. And often we are the heartbeat hotline. So we called it the heartbeat hotline because we believe the people are the heartbeat of an organization. And we find that the top 2 people that call us are actual HR executives who want to talk things through before they move forward with something, and executives who have a challenge with their C-suite, with their HR team, with an employee as sort of like, let's just talk it out. And that really started as a loss leader for us. It was, you need me for 15 minutes, I'll invoice you for 15 minutes. And it really has allowed that, can I pick your brain, to actually have a revenue model attached to it.
It's the Costco loss leading $1.50 hot
That's
dog and
right.
drink, but it keeps you in the store.
It
Keeps
does.
coming back.
Well, and it builds
Yeah.
credibility. I think for
Yeah.
for most of our clients, like there are clients that have been using us for years that way. But then, there was a client who had a return to office program after COVID. We were the call they made. We'd been guiding them for years on a as needed basis. And so when there was a project, we were the call. When the executives wanted to talk out whether to do a program this way or that way, we were brought in to advise. And so I think the other piece for us is that something that is really powerful about fractionals is we all lead the company from the expertise. So we're not, a CEO that's never done HR and then advising and then throwing in someone. Like, we're not the sales rep of the company. We are the experts in HR and recruitment. And so when I walk into a client site, I'm not advising them on sort of a hypothetical of what someone else can do. I've been in their seat most likely, and I've built a company, I've built an HR department, and so I can see what they're going through and add value. And I think a lot of fractionals are the same, where you've built 20, 30 years of expertise under your belt. You're not going in just as a business owner, you're going in as an expert as well as a business owner.
We know that the fractional market is very hot right now. A lot of people are going fractional. A lot of businesses are hiring fractional. Do you have any view as to what the demand side looks like from businesses who are looking to hire fractionals?
Yeah, I think we're finding that there's definitely an appetite for it. It's likely going to be because of the current economy, and so there's so many people that are out of work, and there's so much uncertainty on how companies are going to be able to scale and do certain things, and so there's very low risk. Fractionals are essentially the like new world contractor, right? So you can hire someone on a short-term basis with a lot of expertise, and it's a lot less risk. So I think from a company perspective, it's easy because it's let me try you for a month, and if you can't do what I need to do, then I'll go hire the person full time. And more often than not, the fractionals should have more expertise than what's even needed, because not every organization needs a chief marketing officer. They might just need a marketing director. So if you get a CMO in that seat, they can do an exceptional job. And so I think that as needed service is really helpful. But I will say that I think when the market heats up, we have, for example, HR and recruitment are really hot right now. We're hiring those two roles a ton. And more often than not, we're finding the fractional HR consultants coming in and saying, hey, I'd like to be considered for that full-time role. And so that's where we're able to really identify that the fractional route was something that was temporary or a stopgap or maybe just misaligned for them. But we're finding, at least on the HR side, a lot of fractionals are applying to our full-time HR roles.
Do you get any questions from fractionals or from businesses about AI and I guess more business side?
Yeah.
Companies coming to you and saying, hey, we want to implement AI in the business. We've heard horror stories of it not going well because we weren't people first. Do you get involved in kind of coaching the business or helping them with implementing AI in a people friendly way, so to speak?
Yeah. So one of the things that we talk a lot about with employers is if you don't talk about it, your employees are assuming. And so it's a non-negotiable. You don't have a choice. You have to talk about AI in your business. And I do think it's a misnomer that AI is replacing jobs right now. I think it may in the future for sure. I'm not naive to that. But I think at the moment, what AI is used for the majority of small businesses that are using fractionals is to augment their current staffing needs. So they might continue to hire at a lower rate, but I don't think that they're firing people and replacing them with AI bots. And so as employers, you have an obligation to talk about that. You have to strategize on what type of AI tools you're going to leverage. So we have a client, we support them as their HR department. And in rolling out their AI, one of the things that we looked at was the specific tool that the organization is going to use, making sure that it's homogenous across the group. So not everyone's using all these different tools, a requirement to use it within their own sort of IT system, making sure that it's only used in a specific way. So HR will come in and support you with building out those policies, but also being very clear on the why. So we're giving you access to Claude or Perplexity for this particular reason. So this is the scope in which that we're using it. This is how we're collecting the data, and this is what the output should be. And often what people are feeling is much more secure in their roles because you're not training AI to do your job. You're training it to help you do your job more effectively. And those are two very different things. So we do a lot of work when it comes to guiding employers in how they're going to communicate what AI is being used for, how they're going to monitor the systems that are being used, and then how we're going to hold employees accountable to that. There are some organizations where it's optional. There are others that are AI first. And so if you're not on board, you won't be with the company long term. And there's everything in between. And so we work really closely with, IT and cybersecurity firms, but also with a lot of firms that are working with the AI sort of specifications and limitations. We also work with legal. And so, it's a partnership. And I think that that's been a very, very popular call for us to be getting is what do we do about AI?
I can't help but think about the movie Up in the Air.
Yes.
The famous HR movie with George Clooney, where he's that guy that you call in when you want to let go of a whole bunch of people and you don't want to do it yourself. Have you ever been brought in to let go of a layer of people because they're being replaced by AI? Have you seen
Not for
that?
AI. I'm definitely someone. Our firm has an offboarding program, so we support organizations in. Especially it started during COVID when we had to do layers and layers of layoffs. And then again, a couple of years ago during tariffs, it was a really challenging time for a lot of our manufacturing clients. And what we do is we come in and make sure that they do that ethically and kindly, and also set those employees up for success with making sure that they have access to my book or that they have access to resume writing and our recruitment team. So the offboarding program, very popular. I work in technology, we're industry agnostic. So from technology to professional services, manufacturing, nonprofits, a huge part of our stuff. I have yet to be asked to terminate anyone so that they could bring in AI. And I have yet to terminate anyone who refused to use AI. Most organizations aren't even there yet. So I do think that there are likely some, bigger, the Facebooks and, the companies that are talking. Sure, you can leverage those, but let's be honest, most companies aren't doing what Meta is doing. Most companies are just trying to get through the next few years of ambiguity. And if AI is just another tool, the same way that a note taker was or our emails were, so it's just another tool that we're trying to use to get further ahead. But nope, I have not been asked to do any terminations around AI at all.
All right, Natasha, let's wrap it up with our traditional last question here. If you could put a message on a billboard for millions of fractionals and business leaders to drive by and see and be inspired by every day as they drive by it on the highway of life, what would that one message be?
Oh, that's such a good question. Your title and your salary do not define you. What you
Your
do,
title.
your
Oh,
title
goes.
and your
Yeah.
salary do not define you. What you do and how you do it does.
Great parting words. Love it.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was fantastic.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Natasha, for being here today on the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. That's a wrap on another episode of the Fractional Pros Canada podcast. If you're a fractional professional based in Canada, we'd love to have you join us in the Fractional Pros Canada Facebook group, the home for Canada's fractional community. It's where Canadian fractional executives connect, share insights, and help each other succeed. Until next time, I'm Robert Mendelson, Fractional CMO. May your impact be full-time, even if your hours are fractional.